Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that's probably on a lot of your minds as you think about retirement, especially here in the U.S. It's how Social Security benefits are taxed. We've got some really interesting articles, actually, about covering some states that are actually changing their rules around these taxes.
Hmm.
And there's even a brand new bill that's moving through Congress.
Yeah.
So did you know that where you decide to retire can have a big impact on just how much of your Social Security you actually get to keep? By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a way clearer picture of how these taxes vary across the country. And we'll also look at how this new development could actually affect millions of public service workers.
It really is fascinating to see how much the landscape is shifting. More and more states are choosing to not tax Social Security benefits. In fact, by 2025, only 9 states will still fully tax these benefits.
Really? Only 9. That's a pretty small number. Which states are we talking about?
Yeah, it's down to Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, Montana, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, and West Virginia. It's interesting, these states are mostly in the Northeast and the Mountain West, which makes me think that maybe regional differences are playing a role in how states are approaching this whole issue.
So there's a bit of a geographic pattern there. But even within these 9 states, I'm guessing it's not quite as straightforward as just tax or no
Yeah.
tax, right? There must be some differences depending on individual circumstances.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's super important to actually look beyond those headlines and really get into the specifics of each state's rules. For example, in Colorado, if you're 65 or older, you can fully deduct your Social Security benefits from your state income taxes. And starting in 2025, that'll include people between 55 and 64, as long as their income is below a certain limit, of course.
So it seems like age and income play a big part, even in states that generally tax these benefits. Makes sense, but it definitely shows how important it is to do your research and understand the rules in each state. Now let's talk about the states that don't tax Social Security benefits. What kind of financial impact does that have for retirees?
Well, the savings can be pretty big. Like imagine you're getting, let's say, $30,000 a year in Social Security benefits. In a state with a 5% effective tax rate, that's a $1,500 savings every year just by living in a state that doesn't tax those benefits.
Yeah, that's $1,500 that can go right back into your pocket. And when you think about all the retirees in those states, the numbers get even bigger. One article mentioned that Missouri retirees save like $309 million dollars a year just from not having those benefits taxed.
Yeah, exactly. These tax policies can really make a difference in people's lives, especially during retirement.
Okay, so we've covered what's happening at the state level, but there's also some news at the federal level
Hmm.
that could have a big impact on how much people get in Social Security benefits, regardless of where they live, actually.
You're talking about the Social Security Fairness Act, right? That bill aims to increase Social Security benefits, specifically for public service workers like teachers, police officers, firefighters.
Yeah, that's the one. Honestly, when I first heard about it, I was a bit confused about how things work for these workers right now. Can you maybe give us a little background?
Sure. So right now there are these two provisions, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. They can actually reduce Social Security benefits for a lot of public service workers. So let's say you were a teacher for 30 years, you have a pension, but you also had a side job where you paid into Social Security. Because of these provisions, your Social Security check could be lower, even though you contributed through that side job.
That does seem kind of unfair. So this new bill, the Social Security Fairness Act, wants to fix that. What would that actually look like?
Well, it aims to completely get rid of both of those provisions, the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. So that means millions of public service workers, almost 2.8 million to be exact, could see a much bigger check when they retire.
That's a huge change that could affect a lot of people.
Yeah.
Where does the bill stand right now, like in terms of it actually becoming law?
Well, it just passed in the House of Representatives, actually with bipartisan support, which is pretty amazing these days. So now it's on to the Senate,
Hmm.
where it'll be debated and examined more closely. This bill has sparked a lot of conversation about whether the current system is fair to these workers and how any changes might affect Social Security's finances in the long run.
Yeah, I can see how this would cause a lot of discussion. What are some of the main arguments on both sides?
Well, the people who support the bill say it's about fairness. They think public service workers should get the full benefits they've earned. They shouldn't be penalized for the career they chose. They really emphasize how positive it would be for millions of Americans to get rid of these rules.
What about those who are against it? What are their worries?
Their main concern is the impact on the federal budget, which is already stretched pretty thin. The Congressional Budget Office thinks this bill could add $195.6 billion to the deficit, over the next 10 years.
So it seems like a complicated issue with good points on both sides. It'll be interesting to see what happens with it in the Senate.
Absolutely. It's definitely important to think about all the arguments as this discussion continues.
Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. We've looked at how states are changing things up with taxing Social Security benefits, and we took a close look at the Social Security Fairness Act and how it could change things for a lot of public service workers. But there's still more to explore, so stick around for part 2.
It's clear that this whole issue of how we tax and fund Social Security is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. I mean, Social Security itself has a pretty long and complex history.
Yeah, that's true. It's easy to get caught up in the current debates and forget that Social Security's been around for a while and that it's changed over time. When was Social Security even created, and what was the original idea behind it?
Well, Social Security was signed into law way back in 1935 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. During the Great Depression, you have to think about the context. Millions of Americans were out of work and poverty was everywhere. The idea behind Social Security was to create a safety net, to make sure that older Americans who had worked their whole lives wouldn't end up poor in their old age.
Wow, it sounds like a pretty radical idea at the time, to provide some kind of financial security during retirement. But how did it even work back then? Was it always funded the same way it is now?
At first, it was a pay-as-you-go system. What that meant was that the taxes paid by people working at the time were used to pay the benefits of the people who were already retired. It worked pretty well in the beginning because there weren't that many retirees, and people didn't live as long.
But as time went on, things started to change. People started living longer. The baby boomers started retiring. I'm guessing that put some strain on the whole pay-as-you-go system.
Exactly. The ratio of workers to retirees has been shrinking for decades, which means there are fewer people paying into the system to support a growing number of people receiving benefits. And this has raised concerns about whether Social Security can last in the long run.
That's what we hear all the time in the news,
Mm-hmm.
that Social Security is facing some serious financial problems. Is it really going to go bankrupt?
Well, bankrupt might be a little too strong. I mean, Social Security is not going to disappear overnight. But the program's trust fund, it's projected to run out of money in the next decade or so if we don't make any changes.
So what happens if the trust fund runs dry? Do benefits just stop?
Not necessarily. Even if that happens, the Social Security Administration could still pay out a good chunk of the planned benefits, probably around 75%, just from the payroll taxes that are still coming in.
So maybe not a total collapse, but definitely something to worry about. Seems like we might have some tough decisions to make about how to fix these problems.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of debate about possible solutions, like raising the retirement age, or increasing payroll taxes, or changing the way benefits are calculated. These are complicated issues without easy answers.
Yeah, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Thinking about these big challenges facing Social Security, let's get back to what we're focusing on in this deep dive: how Social Security benefits are taxed. We talked about how more states are choosing not to tax them. But at the federal level, it's different, right?
That's right. At the federal level, part of your Social Security benefits could be taxed. It depends on your combined income.
Combined income. Sounds complicated. What does that even include?
Your combined income is your adjusted gross income, plus any non-taxable interest you have, and then half of your Social Security benefits.
So it's not just my salary. It's a mix of different income sources. What are the income limits for federal taxes on benefits?
Okay, so for individuals, if your combined income is between $25,000 and $34,000, up to 50% of your benefits might be taxable. And if your combined income is over $34,000, up to 85% of your benefits could be taxed. Now, for married couples filing jointly, it's $32,000 to $44,000 for up to 50% of benefits being taxed, and over $44,000 for up to 85%.
Okay, so the more you earn, the more of your Social Security benefits could be taxed. That's definitely something to think about when you're planning for retirement. It's not just how much you'll get in benefits, but how much you'll actually keep after taxes.
Exactly. It shows why you need to think about your whole financial picture.
You know, it's interesting. We often talk about taxes like they're a bad thing, but they pay for so many important things: schools, roads, and as we've been talking about, Social Security itself.
That's a really good point. People often see taxes in a negative way, but they're essential for a society to function. When we talk about Social Security, the taxes we pay today are what allow current retirees to get their benefits. It's a system built on everyone sharing the responsibility.
And as we've seen, it's a system with some real challenges, but it's also one that's worth protecting. Social Security helps millions of Americans, and we need to figure out how to make sure it's around for the long haul.
I totally agree. We need to have open and honest conversations about how to solve these problems. And that means being thoughtful, willing to compromise, and committed to finding solutions that work for everyone.
Well said. Before we go to part three, I want to go back to the Social Security Fairness Act for a sec. That bill brings up a lot of important questions about how we make things fair for public service workers, while also making sure Social Security stays strong.
Right. It's complicated. If we get rid of the rules that lower benefits for public service workers, how will that affect Social Security in the long term? Will we need to change other parts of the system? These are the questions lawmakers will need to think about carefully.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot to consider. What would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away so far? What do you hope they're getting from this deep dive?
I hope they're getting a better understanding of how complicated Social Security is, both how it's taxed and the bigger challenges it's facing. It's a system that affects all of us, and knowing about it is important. I also hope this makes them think about their own retirement plans and how these things might play a role in their own lives.
That's a great point. Knowing more is always better. And understanding Social Security can help you make smarter choices about your own financial future.
Definitely. Planning for retirement can seem scary, but learning about these things is a good first step.
We've really covered a lot in this part of our deep dive. We've explored the history of Social Security, dug into the program's financial problems, and looked at how benefits are taxed by both states and the feds. But we're not done yet. In part three, we're switching gears to talk about some practical steps you can take to plan for your own retirement, no matter what happens with Social Security. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about Social Security, and I know it could be a bit much. State taxes, federal taxes, possible changes, those long-term challenges. Whew. But hey, knowledge is power, right? Now that we get how Social Security works, let's talk about what you can actually DO to plan for retirement.
That's the spirit. We can't tell the future of Social Security for sure, but we can absolutely take steps to be ready, whatever happens.
That's definitely good to hear. But where do we even start? Retirement planning seems like this huge puzzle with a zillion pieces.
It definitely can feel that way. Let's break it down into smaller, easier steps. I think the very first thing is to imagine your retirement goals. Like, what kind of lifestyle do you see yourself having? Where do you want to live? What'll make you happy and fulfilled? Once you have that vision, you can figure out how much money you'll need.
Okay, so first we dream big and decide what we actually want retirement to look like. Then we get practical, crunch some numbers, and figure out how to make those dreams real.
Exactly. That's where a solid financial plan is key. It's all about looking at your finances right now. Income, spending, what you own, what you owe, and then trying to guess how those things might change when you retire. Think of it as a map leading you towards your goals.
It makes sense, but I know for a lot of people, all this financial planning stuff is like another language. If you're not a financial expert, how do you even get started?
There are so many resources to help you. Financial advisors can give you personalized advice, but there are also lots of online tools and calculators that can help you estimate what you'll need and make a savings plan. The important thing is to start early and keep putting money in, even if it's not a lot.
I love that. Start early and be consistent. Such good advice. But life can be so unpredictable. Unexpected bills, changing jobs, the stock market going up and down. How can people actually stick to their retirement plan when life throws those curveballs?
Being flexible is really important. Your retirement plan needs to change as you do. It's not meant to be set in stone. Don't be afraid to look it over and adjust it as things change. And if you're feeling lost or overwhelmed, that might be a good time to talk to a financial advisor. They can help you deal with the ups and downs of the market, make changes to your investments, and just give you some extra support and expertise.
So have a plan, but be ready to change it. Got it. You know, we've focused a lot on the money side of retirement, but it's not just about the money, is it?
You're so right. Retirement is a big change in life. It's important to think about the emotional and social parts too. How will you spend your time? Will you stay connected with friends and family? What'll give you purpose and keep you busy?
Those are such important questions. We get so focused on the numbers, we forget retirement should be about creating a life that feels good and meaningful.
Exactly. It's about finding new things you're passionate about and ways to give back to your community or the world. Maybe it's traveling, volunteering, trying creative hobbies, or just spending time with loved ones. Having a plan for how you'll use your time and energy is crucial. Retirement is a chance to start a whole new chapter, and that can be so exciting.
It really can. So it's not just about the money. It's about planning a retirement that brings you joy, purpose, and connection.
That's it. And remember, it's never too early or too late to start thinking about this stuff and making a plan.
Well, we've come to the end of our deep dive into Social Security. We looked at how those benefits are taxed, the issues it's facing, and even how to plan for retirement in a more holistic way. I hope you're leaving today feeling more informed and ready to take charge.
I hope so too. And remember, you don't have to figure all this out alone. There's so much information and help out there, so embrace the challenge, stay informed, and take control of your future.
Take control of your future. I love that. And that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, keep being curious, keep learning, and never stop exploring.